In today's video, we have a lot of news updates on the NHL GM meetings taking place in Florida. We have an update on the draft lottery, on the salary cap, as well as potential expansion rumors down the road. We also have some pretty significant prospect signings. We also have another update involving the Ottawa Senators' sale and potential involvement of Ryan Reynolds, and some trade talk involving the Vancouver Canucks and the potential Erik Karlsson move in the offseason. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about here today. A fairly busy news day, especially from the GM meetings, but we'll get to that in just a moment. First up, I want to take a minute and acknowledge Connor McDavid, who's on an absolute tear this season. Seems to be getting better and better and better still. I don't know if he's really completely peaked and hit his full prime here as of yet. McDavid hit the 129-point total last night after picking up a couple of points in the game against the Ottawa Senators. That is now the highest single-season total among active players. And of course, so if you look back during the salary cap era, nobody's had more points in a single season than that, and he still has a fair bit of games left. So the odds of him hitting, over 130 or 140 or maybe even 150 is certainly a real possibility. Kind of reminds us back of the days in the 80s when scoring was significantly higher. So it's quite an accomplishment, especially when you look at other point totals and players who have won the Art Ross Trophy, but nowhere near that in the last 10-20 years. Now on to some prospect updates. I want to start first with a prospect that's making his return to hockey, not a signing per se, but the Pittsburgh Penguins former first-rounder Samuel Poulin, who took a leap of break, or a leap of absence, whatever you want to call it, from the team earlier this season, is making his return. Of course, he was playing in the American Hockey League with Wilkes-Barre, and has been gone for 3 months. I'll show you a picture of a statement here that he put out earlier, basically indicating that he's thankful for all the support he's received from the organization, family, friends, etc. That in the past 3 months he had to take some time away from hockey, take a break basically to work on himself, deal with mental health stuff, and very open about what he was dealing with. And he's ready to come back. So that's great news. I'm sure the Penguins are quite happy with those developments, because he's certainly a promising prospect that was drafted with potential big future. So nice to see him get through the things he was dealing with and make his return. Hopefully the return is successful and he can continue to work on things and make his way to the Penguins roster at the NHL level. A couple of prospect signings, including the Toronto Maple Leafs signing a little bit of what you call a long shot prospect. He was a 2020 7th round pick, but centerman Ryan Fagerberg, who's been playing for the past 3 years at the University of Connecticut, UConn, has got his ELC. So he's leaving college hockey, turning pro. Obviously, he'll go to the minor leagues. His ELC starts next season, but he's also signed an American Hockey League deal to play at the minor leagues level for the remainder of this season. So we'll see how things go. I mean, a lot of 7th round picks don't even get signed, let alone make the jump to the NHL. It is a bit of a long shot, but he's been obviously developing and progressing well, and the Leafs decided to give him his contract here, so good on that. The Montreal Canadiens have signed another, fairly important college prospect. Last year we've seen the same kind of thing with Jordan Harris. Today the Habs have signed defenseman Jaden Struble. Struble also will start in the American Hockey League this year, and his ELC, which is for 2 years because he's a bit older, will kick in next season. So Struble can join the Laval Rocket for the remainder of this season. Struble's a left shot defenseman, making $867,000 per year on the 2-year ELC. He's played the past 3 years at Northeastern University. Certainly a very promising defensive prospect. I mean, the Habs have kind of, developed a lot of good young D prospects. If these guys all kind of work out, they'll have a significantly difficult defense core to play against here in the coming years. But you throw Struble in the mix, with a guy like Harris who just came not long ago. Caden Gooley's looking like a real solid D-man as well. And they have some others there in their system too. So that's a real promising prospect signing for Montreal. I know once you get a player to their 3rd or 4th year of college hockey, there's certainly some concern that the player may not want to sign. But a lot of times it's not because of the organization. It's just that they feel it's best for their development to remain in college, get their education. So can't fault them for that. And they still get the player signed here after 3 years of being drafted. So good on them for getting that done. Some news from the NHL GM meetings. Lots of newsworthy items here today. The draft lottery we found out today will be held on May the 8th at 7 o'clock Eastern time in New Jersey. So obviously that's going to be broadcast on different networks, Sportsnet in Canada, as well as in the U.S. And obviously, that's a big night as the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. We'll finally know who is going to pick first overall. At that point, obviously, the playoffs will be well underway, and we'll know who all the lottery teams are for sure. We kind of have a pretty good idea who most of them are going to be now. There's certainly some teams that could change positions, though, anywhere from that. If you work your way up from the bottom, that, the bottom 6-7 spots are pretty secure. Some of them have been winning more than you would think lately, which is kind of bizarre for this time of year. But obviously, there's still a handful of teams that could change positions a bit. But May the 8th, 7 o'clock Eastern, put that on your calendar. It's going to be a big night, especially when you have a prized possession like Connor Bedard waiting for that to take place to see where he's likely heading. Now, we also found out that the NHL draft as well is confirmed to take place this year in Nashville, June 28th and 29th. So the evening of the 28th will be the first round, and the 29th will be rounds 2 through 7. So I'll say another key date to put on your calendar. July 1st will once again be the Free Agent Frenzy Day. So we're kind of back to what we call a normal hockey calendar after a number of years of trying to get back on track after everything was shut down due to the pandemic. It's been kind of things have been happening at odd times and different dates than we were used to because of the seasons not being all taking place during what we call like the traditional hockey calendar, but we're kind of getting back to that here now. So that's pretty good to see. The Stanley Cup playoffs are confirmed now to start on April the 17th. The last possible date for the Stanley Cup final to take place is June the 3rd. Of course, it could be sooner depending on how the other rounds go and how quickly each team in series wraps up. So we'll have to see about that, but June 3rd will be the latest the Cup final starts. So with the 7-game series, with normally a day off in between, sometimes 2 for travel, then almost depending on how long the Cup final goes, you're probably looking at somewhere between June 15th and 20th, depending on how long the series is. If you go 6 or 7 games before it's all wrapped up, so probably about a week before the draft, most likely. News regarding the salary cap was also discussed today by Gary Bettman as he ramps up these meetings. He finally did his media availability, which always takes place on the last day of the GM meetings. Talking about the salary cap, we don't really have reason to think at this point, based on Bettman's comments, that the salary cap is going to rise any more than $1 million, which is something that we kind of already knew. But he did leave it open to say that it could change, and it's going to have to take some negotiation with the NHLPA for that to happen. He said based on their projections, and he feels that their projections are aggressive but attainable, that even if they hit those projections, that there will be just a little bit short of covering the escrow, so that we wouldn't be necessarily in a spot where all that back money would be repaid so that the cap could go up more. But he did acknowledge that, kind of left it open, acknowledged that the new PA leader, Marty Walsh, obviously they haven't really had to discuss anything. And Marty Walsh, I believe, only officially gets underway in his official title job next week, I believe it is. So he's not even technically in the role just yet. So basically, they could negotiate and take a look at things and see if there's any give and take on things. Obviously, the players are probably going to be, depending on, it really boils down to the player and where they're at in their career. If anybody who's a free agent is going to be all for the cap going up more, because that means there's going to be more money available to spend on players like them who need new deals, players that are, in long-term deals and aren't going to need a contract for several years. They might not care as much, but at the same time, like we've heard of cases before of this becoming an issue amongst the players, because depending on where they're at, they may have a different view or priority of things on at that level. But at the end of the day, Bettman did make sure that he made it known that they kind of could talk and negotiate and see if there's any way it could go up more. But at this point, it's far from a guarantee that anything more than $1 million. And NHL GMs, after the meetings, were saying that they were banking on just $1 million increase when they're doing their projections and kind of factoring things to prepare for off-season moves. So that's kind of a bummer in a way. Hopefully they can figure something out to get a bigger bump in the cap, because it could be greatly used given the number of small increases we've seen since the pandemic hit a few years back. Diamond Sports Group, who runs the a lot of regional sports networks, mainly Bally Sports, which covers several teams in the U.S., has officially declared bankruptcy. Chapter 11 bankruptcy was filed. Now, of course, they've also put out a statement, though, indicating that they still plan to produce games, and nothing is going to change on a day-to-day operation basis. However, I guess the concern from the NHL standpoint is that these regional sports networks, they obviously pay to have the rights to broadcast these games, right? So the NHL teams, I'm sure, are concerned they may not get paid, especially when you get a business that's in bankruptcy. So that's definitely a concern, because whether or not all that revenues received could also be an impact on the salary cap. There's been speculation they were heading down this road for the last number of weeks, and it's now made official. When it comes to the Ottawa Senators sale, we had some fairly significant updates on that today as well. Gary Bettman made a few comments on that situation, saying that it's quite possible that a deal could be in place as early as a few weeks from now. Now, we know that there were several groups that had made bids. Of course, their first phase of the bidding process is not you're not committed to pulling through on it. Obviously, it's a non-committal bid, but obviously they got some fairly significant groups with deep pockets that are very, very interested here. They did make it known as well that it's not a condition of the sale for the team to, for the new owners to take the new arena situation of LeBreton Flats downtown. Like, that's not required to pursue that. If they want to remain in Canada, the Canadian Tire Center, that's going to be up to them. I would suspect that most of those new ownership groups see the benefit of the team going downtown. So I would be quite surprised if they chose not to, but just that's the first I'd heard that it's not an actual condition that's built in there. And of course, and the other big development today that's not coming from news in the NHL, but Ryan Reynolds, who of course has been long rumored to be very interested in being a part of one of the groups that buys the franchise, had some news himself. Now, of course, he's obviously linked to the Remington Group, and they're considered one of the front runners, of course, to make the purchase here. And there's also speculation too that Ryan Reynolds, if the Remington Group is not a successful bidder that's going to have a chance to close the sale and be the owners, that he may try to work himself into another group to buy a minority share of some sort. But the bigger news on Ryan Reynolds' part is, of course, he, as most of you may know, because there's a lot of commercials out there, but Mint Mobile, he's one of the owners of that. And that's a fairly good size mobile company in the United States. It was just announced today that the company's being sold to T-Mobile. Of course, they've been piggybacking on the T-Mobile networks the whole time they've been in existence, so it makes sense they already had an existing relationship with them. But the sale is for $1.35 billion. That's a significant sale. Now, Ryan Reynolds doesn't own 100% of that. He's rumored to own somewhere around 25%. So if you think about it, even 25% of that chunk of change is still pretty significant. I've seen different estimates that he's going to walk away with anywhere from $100 to $300 million, depending on what the exact percentage is. It said it's only speculated on what that was. I don't know if we have anything to confirm that. So certainly it's a great way for him to free up and liquidate a significant amount of money to make another significant purchase, wouldn't you say? So things are lining up quite nicely for there to be some sort of connection there for him to be involved in the sale. So it's looking more and more likely that he will be involved. Just a matter of is it the Remington Group that's going to be successful, or is it going to be another group, and is he going to have to find a way to jump ship and get in there? I don't know, but I know it sounds like Gary Bettman's extremely interested and finds it important for him to be involved. The amount of marketing they can get through him and his Hollywood status is enormous to help grow the game and help grow the team and everything that goes with it. So I certainly hope it works out. Bettman also made some comments today as well on expansion, as he was asked about the recent rumors about Atlanta and Houston being the next NHL franchises. And he said essentially that they're not in expansion mode right now. It's not what he called a front burner topic. Didn't sound like it was impossible to think, though, that it couldn't happen at some point in time, because he didn't say that we'll never expand or anything like that. He just said it's not a front burner topic, and they're not in that mode right now. Of course, they're trying to get the Senators sold, and you have to think there was all the speculation about the price of the Senators being possibly north of $900 million, approaching $1 billion. That's going to probably have a big impact on future expansion. We've seen the Penguins be sold here most recently as well to the Fenway Group. That was a pretty significant price tag. If the Senators change hands, for that kind of similar price tag as well, that's going to only help push values up across the league. And obviously, it's going to make the next franchises be that much more valuable right off the hop. So yes, the franchise fee could possibly even hit $800 million to $1 billion. It's quite possible. We've seen, $500 million for Vegas, $650 for Seattle, and, it's going to be that much more next time around whenever that time comes. But as far as what cities could be a potential candidate to get a team, he basically said that cities like Atlanta, Houston, and he even mentions Quebec City as well, are places that they get interest from and inquiries on a fairly regular basis. So essentially, like we had said before, it doesn't mean that the league was actively looking into it. It doesn't mean the league absolutely wants to go to any of those places. It's more of a case of there being ownership groups in those cities that are interested in getting a team and are putting feelers out to the league to try to get them to have conversations about getting a new franchise. And obviously, they're likely the same ones that are putting information out to different media outlets to try to get it more attention, to build up a more of a rally around getting a team behind it and getting the fans excited, right? So it makes a lot of sense in that standpoint. But for right now, don't expect expansion. And like I said before, I'd be quite surprised if Quebec City wasn't at the very least in the mix. And it sounds like they would be, should that time actually come that they want to seriously consider doing so. Into the trade section of the video today, I know a couple of things I want to take a look at. One, on the latest podcast, the 32 Thoughts, and on the Jeff Merrick show, we've seen Merrick and Friedman talking a bit about Erik Karlsson. Now, today on Friedman's segment on the Jeff Merrick show, they talked again about Erik Karlsson of San Jose, and Friedman said he doesn't get the feeling that San Jose Sharks really want to go into a rebuild. He sees them trying to kind of retool here more on the fly, and that, yes, obviously, they've made some big moves, including Timo Meier here at the deadline, and they're probably going to see some more moves in the offseason, but not necessarily going to strip it right down and start over again. Now, of course, it sounds pretty clearly Erik Karlsson would love the chance to be moving in a fresh start. Obviously, he's having a phenomenal season, but he clearly wants to win and have a chance of the Stanley Cup, and it's not going to happen where he's at anytime soon. Team that Friedman mentioned today that he felt made a lot of sense, but wasn't sure exactly what the trade would look like, is the Florida Panthers, which was a surprising team name we've heard, but the Oilers being serious at one point. It came up maybe him going back to Ottawa, which would be, again, difficult for a lot of these teams to handle cap-wise, but not that Florida would be any different, but Florida would certainly have to find a way to shed other significant contracts. Like if they can move on from Bobrovsky, that would be a huge help. I'm not sure that that's really in the cards, but that's something that they would probably have to consider exploring if they were going to be serious about acquiring Karlsson. I do see that there would be a good fit there, and I'm sure that he would, go from one warm, sunny climate to another. So from a family perspective, it might work out well as well. But obviously, that's just a team that I haven't really heard Karlsson being linked to before. So we'll see if Friedman's hunch has anything to it. And if the Panthers are a team that's in the mix in the offseason when their Karlsson trade talk certainly seems to resurface and kind of heat up again, because it is widely expected the Sharks are going to have lots of conversations and seriously want to consider getting a deal done to move that contract off their books to get him off to another team. Some speculation about Vancouver as well. Thomas Drance in The Athletic recently have an article out talking about the future of a few players, mostly JT Miller and Brock Besser. Now, of course, the speculation on JT Miller here is, would they trade him before his no trade kicks in? Because his new contract that he signed, which was a surprise to everybody, which certainly caused them to be, kind of pretty tight cap-wise, which kind of forced a Bo Horvat trade earlier to the New York Islanders. The no trade that comes with that doesn't kick in until July the 1st. So could we see a trade by the draft? He kind of says it seems possible, but it's going to be quite challenging given the fact that a lot of teams might shy away because of the contract. As much as they might like the player, they may not want the turbo of money that he comes with. Obviously, that's going to be an issue. And unless the Canucks are willing to retain money, which I can't see them doing on a 7-year term, or adding a sweetener, which is doubtful. And at the same time as well, taking back a contract that might help the other team fit him in cap-wise, depending on if they have an unfavorable deal or something they'd like to get off their books as a return. It's complicated to say the least, so I'm not really sure that we see a high probability of a JT Miller trade. I wouldn't rule it out for sure, but at the same time, I'm not real optimistic that we're going to see one. I think it would help the Canucks substantially because it would give them a lot of cap flexibility, but at the same time, would be extremely complicated. When it comes to Brock Besser, Drance even mentions the possibility of him along with a few other players, maybe even being buyout candidates if they can't find a trade, which would be, something that you would have expected. This is the first we've heard of Besser being a buyout potential candidate. But if it boils down to it, the problem is he would become a UFA and that they would lose him for nothing. Not really great asset management on that standpoint, but at the same time, when you have a player that's making a big chunk of money and not producing to the level that's expected, and nobody wants to trade for him, you either keep sticking with him and letting the contract carry on, or you go down this road. Unfortunately, Besser he's played a little bit better as of late. I think a lot of the players on that team have. Certainly, they've been winning more. But he's had a tough time, especially with the loss of his father. He did admit recently that it's been really tough on him from a mental standpoint, and that sure is likely impacting his production. But at the same time, like, imagine a blockbuster buyout. But if they did do that, basically he'd have 2 years left on his contract at well over $6 million. The buyout would then knock his cap hit down for the remaining 2 years of that contract down to 2.2. So they'd save $4.4 million in the next 2 years, but then they'd have 2 additional years of cap hit on there as well, at $2.2 million as well. So basically it would be equivalent to $8.8 million over 4 years, because it's 2/3 of the money over twice the period of time. So it wouldn't be terrible from a cap perspective. It's just a player like Besser's stature is not someone you expect to be a candidate for buyout. He also mentions as well, it's Allred, Karlsson, and Connor Garland also, if they can't find trades for them, being potential buyout candidates as well. I don't know how eager the Aquilini ownership group there is going to be doing any buyouts and having dead money on the cap. Obviously, it's going to be tough to make a lot of significant moves, having a tight cap situation on a team that's underperforming. But I don't know. I mean, maybe one of these players becomes a buyout. I don't see them doing much more than that, and I would like to think that they might go down the route of a trade with a sweetener before they would do that. I think I would rather maybe lose a draft pick or something rather than have, a player impacting my cap for twice the period of time they're already on the hook for. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting summer in Vancouver to see how this team responds. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.